Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Mike Anderson. This is our first real conversation. Many of my guests, I've known them quite a while. You know, we have that kind of banter going on. But Mike and I have just spent 5 minutes talking, and I've already got the measure of the man. Well, I think I do anyway. Let's see what you all think. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you for having me, Mindy.
So we do want to encourage exciting, radical, original ideas, and we like to showcase people who are doing exciting, radical, disruptive things. You qualify, so we will get straight into that. Tell everybody what you're up to in the world.
Okay, so my main project at the moment is building a new kind of platform for decentralized economic systems called Convex. And we're set this up as a non-profit foundation because we have this fundamental belief that technology is going to enable new ways of people exchanging value and interacting with each other on a peer-to-peer basis in the future. And probably you've heard a lot about crypto and blockchains. What we're really thinking about is an evolution of those ideas to really enable decentralized economic systems and to make that cheap and inclusive for everyone on the planet.
What got you interested in this? I should say passionate about this, because you've done many other things in your career. So how did this come about?
I think a large part of it came about from I worked for many years as a consultant at McKinsey and Company, and I got to see many different organizations, multinationals around the world, and work with a number of governments on important topics like development and economic efficiency. And, one common observation is that we do have these very large, bureaucratic, expensive infrastructures which have been built up around finance and economics. And a huge amount of human waste, human capital and energy is basically getting consumed just keeping these things running. And, with my engineering hat on, there has to be a more efficient way of running our societies and enabling people to do business and enabling people to live their lives without, paying vast amounts of money just to keep the lights on and to keep the basics of our economy running. So when I got involved in the crypto space, I realized, well, in fact, these decentralized systems have the potential to be the solution to that problem, which I'd been observing for many years. So came to this view that, look, if we could build a sufficiently powerful decentralized system that enabled economic systems, we could actually do something very, very special and start to really make the whole world economy more efficient and make that work better for people and for their lives.
So this is a work in progress, as all of our projects are, and in fact, as we are as human beings. But as it's evolved, what have you discovered or learned that has enabled you to continue with this?
Well, one of the things that I think has been most critical is focus on a vision and the mission that we're trying to achieve, that we are trying to be decentralized. For example, we do believe in inclusivity. We do believe in building a system that, is effective for everyone on the planet. And what that does is it draws people with similar ideals to the project. So many of the people who work on the project, they're not doing it for cash. They're not doing it for a big paycheck. They're doing it because they actually believe in the mission of what we're doing and where it might go and the potential that these ideas have. And I think that creates a stronger team if you actually do have a shared vision, if you do have a shared purpose. And, I think in terms of putting together an organization which is going to be effective in the long run, the right values and the right mission are absolutely crucial to that.
Yeah. And we do discuss these topics a lot on this show. And we also discuss the fact that it's not always smooth sailing. So if you don't mind, would you share what has been the biggest obstacle or challenge, maybe something that you did not anticipate?
I think one of the biggest challenges is, in this context, we're trying to do a foundation-based model, and we're trying to do a decentralized model where people can really self-select into their areas of interest and areas that they're passionate about, which has many advantages, but it also has disadvantages in the sense that you haven't got this battle plan and you haven't got this hierarchical command and control structure that you might have in a more traditional company. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges has been you have this level of fluidity in what's happening and who's involved, and people's levels of commitment might vary from time to time for all kinds of different reasons, including personal reasons. And you have to be very agile and responsive to deal with those kind of challenges. And it means that making sort of fixed plans is a little bit harder than it might otherwise be. And I think that's kind of inevitable if you're trying to build a more sort of decentralized, non-hierarchical way of organizing a business. But it presents its own unique challenges. And I'd say that some of those have been the biggest challenges. Yeah, when people, for perfectly good reasons and for their own good reasons, may decide they have to leave the project, and then you have to work out how you're going to realign to deal with the gap, etc.
Yes, and as the head of the project, I think you may share that responsibility with a few people, but basically it's up to you to get things back on track, to do the course correction, to keep people motivated and inspired, because, like you say, if it's not about the cash, there really needs to be a good incentive for people to plug in and stay plugged in. And you like my matrix metaphor there. So we've got an interesting situation because things are evolving. You haven't got this battle plan. You have a great vision and a great passion for what you're doing, and it is very exciting, and it's noble and it's thoughtful. So, but it takes time, and people have lives. So what is your best advice, in fact, as a thoughtful leader for people who are involved in multiple projects and it's not maybe their core work? What would you have to say to somebody who is working on a project that is fluid like that?
I would say very clear communications about what it is and isn't. Yeah. So let me give an example. We have some fantastic people involved in the project as advisors, who bring fantastic experience, fantastic advice to the project. And, we're very privileged to have them on board, but they're not team members. Yeah. You can't give them a task. You can't give them a report to write. Yeah. So it's being very clear that this is the deal for advisors. The advisors, you give advice, you join a few events and a few meetings now and again, but, you're not part of the core team. You're not going to get dumped a load of work on you. Yeah, it's part of being a broader network. And just being very clear about that so that, everyone knows that, okay, this is what I can expect. This is what I get out of it. This is how we create a win-win for everyone involved. And, in some cases it helps to write these down, but in an informal way. Yeah, not so much as like a big legalese contract, but hey, you do this, we do this, we both win. And I'm a big believer in, getting very, very simple, informal agreements written down so everyone can go, yes, that's what we're talking about. And yes, we're all on the same page. And obviously, whenever there's a lack of clarity, you have to have a human conversation about it. And, the earlier you do that, if there is any sort of sense of people drifting off track, you just need to course correct a little bit and, realign the expectations maybe. But as long as you keep good relationships and you keep a focus on the mission and you have honest conversations at the right time, then all of those things are relatively easy to solve.
I love that. When there's a lack of clarity, you have to have a human conversation about it. I was beginning to think, what other kinds of conversations are there besides human ones? But that's my science fiction passion coming out. I've really enjoyed speaking to you about all this positive stuff. And I'd like to understand, and I think my listeners would like to understand, where you have frustrations on a more global level. So you alluded to it when we started, that was kind of the impetus for the project. But where do you still get frustrated as a thoughtful leader when you look at our society?
I'd say probably the thing that I guess frustrates me, but I don't let it derail me, is I'm very concerned about the ecological crisis. So about climate change, about the loss of biodiversity, about the damage that we're doing to our natural world. And, that's something I'm very passionate about. I'm not a climate scientist and I'm not a campaigner on these topics, so I can't directly help, but I am hoping that some of the stuff that we do can indirectly help those causes. So something I'm very passionate about on a personal level, but maybe I have to accept that I'm not the person leading that fight. I have a slightly different mission to follow, but I will do everything I can to sort of support and help those causes where it's possible.
Well, of course, we're not going to leave it there, because that's fascinating that, Convex, the platform and the vision, can help our environment, perhaps. Can you just share a little bit without getting too technical? I know you're an engineer, but what is that?
I'd say there's a few reasons. One is, the platform itself is energy efficient. So you may have heard about the very high energy consumption of some of the more traditional blockchain platforms, such as Bitcoin, consumes, more energy than many small countries. So simply replacing that legacy blockchain technology with energy efficient technology is alone a massive potential win. Then I think the other area where we can help the environment is because Convex lets you create economic systems and smart contracts and digital assets, you can use that to help fix some of the incentives around climate change. So, for example, around carbon pricing, around carbon credits, around supply chain and tracking supply chain and these kind of things in an efficient way. So that can actually help to create the right economic incentives for people to solve the problem. Because without the right incentives, people aren't necessarily going to act in their everyday lives on these issues, even if they, philosophically and know they're important. Yeah, unless you actually see the prices reflect the carbon cost on the planet, then you're not necessarily going to change your behavior on a regular basis. And then I think the third and very important way that we can help significantly is, as I said, waste in our economies relating to finance and transaction costs. That's just waste. There's a vast amount of infrastructure and resource just being plowed into making these systems run, and human effort and human life to make financial systems operate in a very inefficient way. And by solving that problem, well, we just remove a lot of waste from the economy. We free up those people to do maybe more meaningful things, and we stop wasting the energy and resources which is currently sort of occupied in sort of fulfilling those roles in our economies. So yeah, those would probably be my three ways that we indirectly help with the climate crisis.
That's fantastic. And you've got a big fan here. Efficiency is my middle name, not really, but it might as well be. And, I like the idea of reducing waste and freeing people up to do more meaningful things. Wow. Wouldn't that be great? Because I don't know what the statistics are. I'm not, up to speed with the current levels, but apparently there's a very, very large percentage of employed people who are dissatisfied or actively disengaged and don't feel that their job, their role, and their work is meaningful. And that's just so sad. So, for all of my employed listeners who can relate to what I just said, keep the faith. because, Mike, myself, a lot of other good people, a lot of guests that we've had are doing things to create more opportunities. So hang in there, be creative, don't just walk off and I won't call it that phrase. Well, I will. It's quiet quitting, but don't sell yourself short. That's really what I'm getting, because there is a better way, as Mike's just been sharing. So let's just finish up by talking about this concept of thoughtful leadership. One of the reasons I started this podcast is, I started Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader because people were talking about thought leadership that wasn't always very thoughtful. And I know you can relate to this, Mike. So where do you think people should start if they want to be more thoughtful about their lives and their work?
That's a really hard question. I will maybe give one tip that I found extremely useful, which is always question your assumptions. And this is something that I try and practice as much as I can. But, often you go in with like an assumption that things should be done a certain way, or this is how we have to do things, or this is how we've always done things. And it's often worth questioning those, because often the biggest innovations or the biggest revolutions happen when you realize, in fact, that wasn't such a hard line as you thought. And if you're willing to, take a risk and consider what it might be like if you abandon that assumption, you could often make a big difference. And that's not saying break any rule arbitrarily. It's saying if you want to be a thoughtful leader, you need to at least look at your assumptions, question them, and be willing to break them if it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's what thoughtful is ultimately. You have to figure out whether things make sense or not.
Well, that segues nicely into a reminder to my listeners that there are a lot of other fascinating podcast episodes that you can find. So if you're browsing the Thoughtful Leader podcast, there is one on assumptions. And funny enough, I didn't know Mike was going to say that. So I cannot tell you which episode. So you'll have to look through the whole list. I'm sure you'll find it. One of the interesting ways to really challenge yourself and push your thinking, as we say here, is to ask yourself those hard questions. What else could it mean? What else could we do? How else could we do it? And lots of other questions that probably sound very similar to that. So those founders of startups, people like yourself, Mike, who've taken that risk, are constantly asking those questions. So you don't just answer it once and start something. So, this is a very exciting time. I think, the gig economy, or whatever you want to call it, has enabled people to work in that flexible, fluid way. It's allowed people who run projects to scope them out and to structure them without huge fixed costs or, commitments. The commitment that we have is our energy and our passion. So finally, we will ask you, Mike, to share something that you haven't yet shared in this episode, something that you're really passionate about. And it may not have to do with this project, but is there anything else that you are willing to share that would help people get to know you a little bit more?
I'll share my hobby, which I think it's good to have balance in things. And I spend a lot of time on the computer, writing code, on video calls, having meetings. So my hobby is entirely nonverbal. It's dancing. I do social dancing. So I'm actually a Sarok dancer, which is a kind of modern jive dancing here, which is quite popular here in the UK. And that keeps me sane. It keeps me fit, and it's always a welcome break from being in front of the screen.
How many years have you been doing that?
About 8 years, seriously.
Wow. And obviously it's working because you keep going, and I bet you've really improved in that time. I think I've only done that type of dancing maybe 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4, events. So that's wonderful. And, obviously, my listeners and viewers know that we are multifaceted, that we're not just one thing. Even people who are subject matter experts do have other facets. So I'm thinking we will have an episode about that, because it's an assumption, right? We make assumptions about people. They're an engineer, so that's what they are. Well, that's not all you are. And I'm really, really grateful for you to come on the show today, Mike. Share your wisdom, share the project. Everybody can have a look at the show notes and your bio, and they can check it out in more detail. Is there any last comment, tip, or request that you have for our listeners?
Well, I'd just like to say to you, Mindy, thanks for a great conversation. And I think it's always great to have these kind of conversations and to share ideas. And there's always something to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I've learned a lot by listening to you today. And I know there's even more. And as the project evolves, I'll be watching closely. And you never know, maybe getting involved myself. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks, Mindy.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.